Here's how I studied for my DAT in 3 months and got 94th percentile. Hi everyone, my name is Karen and I am a 4th year student studying pharmacology in Canada. I recently got accepted into dental school here in Canada as well. Today I want to share to you how I studied for the Canadian DAT. Firstly, I want to congratulate for you choosing the path of dentistry. I think dentistry is such an exciting career. I really hope this video helps you on your DAT journey and helps you get a high score so that you can get into dental school. So for my scores that I got the following right here. My academic average was 24, which puts me at 94th percentile. My perceptional ability was 25, making me a 98th percentile on that section. So the biggest, most important resource that I used to study for my Canadian DAT was DAT Crusher. DAT Crusher is sort of like a sub-branch of this other website called DAT Booster. DAT Booster is more catered toward the US DAT, whereas DAT Crusher is more Canadian specific. And so given the option for both of them, I actually went with DAT Crusher because I wanted the information to be more concise and catered toward the Canadian DAT. Now, DAT Crusher was definitely the most expensive resource that I bought. DAT Crusher for me was about 400 USD, or in other words, 500 Canadian dollars. I had bought the 30-day membership, which basically motivated me to study for the DAT within 3 months. But I definitely recommend it. I think that DAT Crusher was extremely useful. They have content and video lessons for all of the sections. I especially really liked their bio and chemistry videos. I thought that those were really helpful, and I definitely recommend watching those first before going into the notes. For chemistry, I didn't really end up using too much of the DAT Crusher notes, but for biology, I used Feralis-Booster notes. Feralis Booster notes are just a collaboration between Feralis, which is somebody who's provided these free biology notes online for the DAT, and Crusher has made these notes a bit more concise so that the content is a bit more high yield. I will say that these Feralis Booster notes are a bit more concise in my opinion for the test. I remember missing a couple of questions because I didn't understand the content, and for biology, it's either you know it or you don't. So if you really want to be more thorough and you want a score that's a bit higher for biology than what I got, I would recommend also going through the Feralis notes, perhaps to supplement your biology knowledge. Another thing that I used for biology that was from DAT Crusher was their Anki deck, which you can find for free actually, provided on their website. Crusher also had a Quizlet deck, so if Quizlet is more your thing, then I definitely recommend that you use whatever you'd like. I personally like Anki a bit more though, because there is that space repetition. The second resource that I used in addition to DAT Crusher was I bought the official full-length test that costed me about $30, which came from the Canadian Dental Association. This one is a no-brainer, even though it's $30 and it's quite expensive just for a test. I definitely think that this was really helpful for helping me to familiarize myself with the content of the exam, and you really don't understand the exam until you've actually written a full-length one yourself. And it really helped me to see which areas of the exam that I needed to work on the most. The last resource that I used were these $10 books that I bought off of Craigslist. The reason why I bought these was primarily because of the reading comprehension practice. I found that there wasn't enough passages on DAT Crusher to fully get me through my practice, and so I wanted to supplement that a bit more so that I could do a bit of reading every single day. No, I actually don't know where these books are anymore. If I find them after recording this video, I will put an image of them up. However, I don't think that they were very well made books. I remember that there were a few typos and that there were questions that had answers that were blatantly just wrong. But if you are somebody who's looking to get a bit more practice, I think that just getting any sort of random book for DAT prep can be helpful. The main thing with reading is practice anyway, and it doesn't really matter what you're reading as long as you're practicing getting faster and comprehending what you're reading. Before I get into my studying schedule, I myself actually don't really like following a schedule. I feel that if I really put that label on it, I feel like I'm kind of constrained, and it's just not my kind of style. And of course, your life is different from mine. So please take my schedule with a grain of salt and adapt your schedule to your own needs. So I started studying in late May, and that was when I registered for the Canadian DAT. I wrote my DAT in early September of 2022. Unfortunately, that was actually when I started school, and I definitely don't recommend that because the stress of studying for the DAT, on top of the stress of starting a new semester, was definitely a lot to go through. And so I recommend that you write your exam in late August, ideally when school isn't starting. So make sure you book early because I definitely slacked off. While I was studying for the DAT, I was working as a research assistant for 40 hours a week. And so most of my studying was actually focused on weekday evenings as well as on the weekends. Like I said before, the first thing that I did was I used the official full-length exam that was provided by the Canadian Dental Association to understand which areas of the Canadian DAT I needed to work on the most. A typical evening on a weekday looked like this. I would start off with 1 hour of reading comprehension, where I would go on DAT Crusher and read one passage from their practice test. The reason why I did reading comprehension first was because it was my least favorite section, and so I did it first to get it out of the way. The way that I tackled the reading section was I read the first few paragraphs, and then I would go into the first question. If I found that I couldn't answer the question using the knowledge that I had from the first few paragraphs, I would click any random answer, flag it, and then move on. I would then try to answer the second question using the knowledge that I got from the first few paragraphs. If I couldn't get it, then I would flag it and then move on. After 2 to 3 flagged questions, I would go back to the passage and read a couple more paragraphs, and then attempt to answer the questions using the new knowledge again. I used this strategy because I found that I would read the passage in whole and then I would forget about all of the details in the passage, and so by reading it in chunks, I found that it would help me because I have some pretty short-term memory. Now, there are lots of strategies that people have used online to get high scores on the reading comprehension section, so definitely try out those strategies online and see what works for you. During the first week of studying or so, I tried all of those strategies and I found that this one worked the best. So I would recommend trying a couple of passages using each strategy and see which one you feel the best with. After I was finished my first hour of reading comprehension practice, I would move on to 2 to 3 hours of reviewing biology or chemistry. Despite taking first year and second year biology and chemistry classes throughout my degree, I still needed to patch up a bit of areas in my bio knowledge. For instance, human physiology was a huge topic that I actually hadn't gotten to cover yet in my school. And so in order to prioritize biology, I wanted to finish off the biology content within the first 2 months, and I left chemistry as for the last month of my studying schedule. This way I could ensure that I covered all of the content for biology first before working onto chemistry, which I already knew most of. I personally used the Feralis Booster collaboration notes for biology. The Feralis Booster notes are organized by chapters based on different topics, and I found that a lot of the earlier chapters I had already covered in my biology classes at school, and so I did skim those, but I didn't really read into those in detail. Most of my efforts were focused on the topics that I didn't fully understand, like taxonomy and human physiology. After learning the biology content in the evening, I would then use the morning the next day in order to practice those flashcards. Every morning I would take the bus to work, and so I would have a pretty long time where I could just focus on my flashcards. I think it's really important that you do the flashcards right after you learn the content because it really helps to solidify that knowledge. It's not really helpful for you to learn pages and pages of notes without really remembering it. I found that this was the most effective strategy for me instead of reading all of the notes all at once and then reviewing at the end. I liked having both of those going on at the same time so that I wasn't forgetting as I was reading. For the first 2 months of my studying, I was averaging 300 to 400 Anki cards a day. Once I finished up my biology review, I could put more time into my Ankis, and so I was averaging about 500 to 700 cards a day, especially leading up to my exam. After I was finished reviewing the content for a specific chapter, I would also start to look at the practice problems that DAT Crusher provides. If I ever got a question wrong, I would star it, and then I would go back to it towards the end of my DAT studying in order to make sure that there weren't any gaps in my knowledge. Once I was done with my biology review for the first 2 months, I switched over to reviewing my chemistry. Because I had a pretty solid chemistry foundation, it only took me about 3 weeks to review my chemistry content in full. I actually used the videos that were provided by DAT Crusher to review my chemistry knowledge. These videos were filmed in collaboration with Professor Dave Explains, which is also somebody you can find here on YouTube. I think that Professor Dave has a great way of explaining things, and he makes chemistry really easy to understand for any person. Another thing that I really liked about these videos was I found that the level of detail in them was actually perfect for my DAT exam, and I think that really played a role in helping me get the score that I got. After watching all of the videos, then I would do the practice problems that were provided by DAT Crusher. I definitely used all of the questions that were provided by DAT Crusher. I think that the questions that they use are really representative of what's on the actual exam. If I ever got a question wrong, I would star it, and what's nice about DAT Crusher is it automatically saves into your profile, making it really easy for you to review your questions later on. About a week before my exam, I made sure to redo all of the chemistry questions that I got wrong. I remember that DAT Crusher also had Anki cards for the chemistry section as well, but I personally didn't use those flashcards because, in my opinion, chemistry is more so about applying than it is about memorizing. The last thing that I would do in the evening was actually the Perceptional Ability section. I would do an hour of perceptional ability practice every single night. The reason why I did the perceptional ability section the last is because I find that it doesn't need as much brain power as reading and also biology and chemistry review, and so I save perceptional ability to the time where my brain is about to turn off. I studied 3 types of questions on day 1 and the other 3 types on day 2. For day 1, I would study view recognition, 3D form folding, and hole punch, and for day 2, I would study keyhole, cube counting, and angle ranking. I would spend 10 to 30 minutes on each of these question types, and I would spend more time on the question types that I found a bit more difficult. For me, I struggled particularly with keyhole and also view recognition. All of the question types, I used the practice questions that were provided on DAT Crusher, as well as some of the generators that DAT Crusher was providing at the time. In particular, I found the angle ranking generator to be helpful. However, I didn't really find the keyhole generator to be very good, at least at the time when I was using it. Perception ability section on the DAT is a lot of just brute force and practice, and so unfortunately I don't have a lot of tips for these sections. However, I will say for the hole punch section, I particularly like the mirror method, and for the cube counting section, I would make a T-table on my paper, label it 1 through 6, and then I would use a tally system to keep track of the number of cubes with those faces exposed. After all of the studying that I would do on the weekdays, I would then use a full-length exam that was provided on DAT Crusher. I would write the exam on Saturday morning and into Saturday afternoon, and then take a break and use the evening to review the questions that I got wrong. I will say that I didn't start doing this on Saturdays until I was about 1 month in, because that was the point when I had already started to review a lot of the biology content. In my opinion, these full-length exams are probably the most precious resource for you, and so to me it seemed like a bit more of a waste to use them at an earlier point of my studying when I didn't fully understand everything in my biology content. I would use Sunday as a break, because breaks are really important, especially when you're studying for a really stressful exam like the DAT for such a long duration of time. The most that I would do on a Sunday was maybe a bit more biology flashcards, but I wouldn't do as much. I would like to emphasize that burnout is a real problem, and I really think that you should prioritize at least 1 day of your week towards giving yourself a break, and especially after you finish your exam as well, give yourself at least a week before you jump into another school year. Lastly, for the days leading up to my exam, I actually visited the test site where I was going to be writing. I think that this is optional for sure, but I definitely think that it helped me because it helped me to familiarize myself with the route and how to get there, because I am very directionally challenged. And also it helped me feel a bit more familiar, and so it helped me reduce the stress that I felt on exam day. The night before my exam, I actually went to bed really early because I knew that I'm the type of person who would be super stressed and wouldn't be able to fall asleep. By the way, on the actual exam day, I only got 5 hours of sleep. And because I couldn't sleep for very long, I woke up pretty early in the morning, and I spent that morning doing a peaceful yoga routine to help myself calm down. Coming out of the exam, I actually felt really terrible. Now, the biology section and the chemistry section and the perceptional ability section, those are at the beginning of the test, and I actually felt really good about those sections when I finished them. However, the reading comprehension section of the exam, I was so not confident whatsoever, but when I got my scores, I was actually really surprised that my reading comprehension section was actually not my lowest score. I think this just goes to show that you really shouldn't psych yourself out after you finish your exam. After you finish your DAT, you just did it, you're done, don't worry about it, and take that week off and don't think about it. Honestly, because it's a curved exam, you really don't know how that curve is going to affect you. It could really save your grade, and I think that it really did for me, and so really it's not worth psyching yourself up after you finish the DAT. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope that my studying schedule and also tips for studying for the DAT were helpful for you. Please make sure to like and subscribe down below, as well as leave any further questions that you have in the comments section. Until next time.